And our next order, they can't hear me?
That's what a couple of the backs said, yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Oh. Okay. I think they've got me all settled now. Next order of business will be an invocation. Commissioner Sterrett?
Yes, this is the time we have set aside for invocation. Joining us this morning is Suzanne Brocky. She has been in ministry for over 20 years, and she's on staff at Church on the Hill, has been since 2012. She serves as a congregational care pastor and is the pastor of the prayer ministry. She also does counseling at the church and has a Bible study on Wednesday nights. She and her husband Jason have been married for 27 years. They have a 26-year-old all the way down to a 2-year-old. And that right there deserves applause. So thank you. Suzanne, thank you so much for being with us today.
Lord God, in Jeremiah 33:3, you tell us to call on you, and you will hear us, you will answer us, and you will tell us mighty and great things that we do not know. So, Father, today, you as our creator, we thank you that you are a God of love. You are a God of relationships. You care about what is going on in our community and in our lives. That is why you sent Jesus to show us what you are like. As he died on the cross for our sins to draw us into relationship with you, Father, you are whispering to us now. You want to guide us and direct us, and you told us to pray for our government so we could live in peace in our relationships with one another and have a safe community. And Father, I bring the needs of our government before you, and I ask you to bless our nation and our county. And Father, I pray for our leaders and for their families. I pray for healing and unity where there is brokenness or confusion. I pray for protection over each and every one of them. I pray that their families, as well as our city and the entire Yamhill County, will live in safety and peace. And Heavenly Father, please grant our leaders discernment and common sense so that they will be strong and effective. Help them today to make good decisions, to be bold, that will be helpful and build up our country, for we will be judged by you on how we treat one another. You said if we need wisdom, we should ask you. We need your wisdom, Lord. Make this government a blessing to the people of Yamhill County. Help us to love one another as you love us. Father, help us to just glorify you in all of our decisions and our attitudes. In Jesus' name, we pray for your glory. This is all for you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you very much, Susan. We now have a period set aside for public comment on any item that is not a quasi-judicial item, and I do have some intent to speak cards. The first one I have is from Susan Meredith. If you would please state your name and address for us for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. Is this the right
Good morning.
place?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good morning. I have attached a transcript of a voicemail message from Commissioner Stan Primizich to Metro Counselor.
The PA system's on.
Oh, it's not here. It doesn't feel like it is.
Could you put the mic closer to your?
Yeah, I couldn't hear Stan.
Is the
I couldn't
mic
hear
on?
anybody either.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Can that mic be turned up?
Everything is turned up.
could I try? Pick this up.
Try it again.
Good morning.
No, they're not.
Should I just speak more loudly?
Is it being picked up?
Well, we need to make sure it's being recorded.
Oh, okay.
Can you call it? Go ahead and just try to speak
Try to
loudly
do
for
it?
right
Okay.
now.
I can tune it up here.
We will get IT over here, but in the meantime, we're going to continue.
Okay,
Thank you.
Attached is a printed transcript of the voicemail message from Commissioner Stan Primizich to Metro Councilor Catherine Harrington, requesting her to vote against a pending Metro ordinance that would prevent Metro waste from coming to Riverbend beginning in January 1st, 2020. Councilor Harrington disclosed receipt of the voicemail in her comments at the May 25th meeting of the Metro Council and provided the transcript printout. I have requested minutes of any meeting of the Board of Commissioners that was held to discuss this matter prior to Commissioner Primizich making this call that would have authorized him to speak on behalf of Yamhill County. To date, I have received none. Thus, it appears there was no discussion of this matter with his fellow board members, and that he took it solely upon himself without authorization of Commissioner Starrett or Commissioner Olson, and using his title as Commissioner Prismadich to state his own personal view on this matter to the Metro Council as if he were representing Yamhill County's position, not just his own. His action was totally unjustified and raises serious questions about his commitment to being both transparent and impartial in his actions on county issues. Please enter this document into the record of today's Board of Commissioners meeting. I forgot to state my name, Susan Meredith. I live at 14100 Southwest McCabe Chapel Road in McMinnville. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Leonard Rydell, if you'd come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Leonard Rydell. I live in the city of Newburgh, 601 Pinehurst Drive, Newburgh, Oregon, zip code 97132. I'm also a licensed civil engineer in Oregon and Washington, water rights examiner in Oregon, and a land surveyor. There's 6 stages to a project: enthusiasm, disillusionment, panic, search for the guilty, punishment of the innocent, and rewards for the non-participants. I was former engineer record for Riverbend Landfill. I hit the disillusionment stage in November 1995 when it became apparent to me that they weren't following the approved plans and specifications, and the DEQ was letting it slide. That continues today. Some citizens in the county reached that disillusionment stage in the 1990s, but they didn't have the funds to pursue it in court. I think the DEQ is now getting to reach that stage. Metro reached it last week. As you know, there's been turmoil over the DEQ in Portland area. We have a new director, going to have a new Environmental Quality Commission. Now, I've raised engineering concerns, and you always call them zoning issues, but when you make a zoning issue, you say engineering concerns aren't zoning concerns. Just how is a person like me supposed to communicate with my commissioners? I gave the DEQ a slide presentation of the problems at Riverbend at their last vertical expansion hearing. I mailed you a copy of that CD. I wonder if you have looked at it. I will be surprised if the DEQ follows through. The landfill is already constructed steeper than allowed by the approved plans and Oregon administrative rule. I enter this as an exhibit to that. The DEQ now has approved a stormwater pond that's outside the permitted boundary. Waste Management never even asked the county for a permit. Here's a letter I'm sending regarding problems in the floodway. You can put that in the record.
Are you wanting these to be in the record of the now pending floodplain permit?
I want it in the record of this meeting.
Okay. Because if you want, this is a floodplain permit, and the stormwater pond you just mentioned is part of that land use application.
Right.
And if the record's open right now, so if you want to put objections in there, you should do that and not address it to the board at this point, because this has not been noticed as a land use hearing for this item.
This letter that I have here does not address the stormwater pond.
Okay.
So it's a copy of the letter on the floodway. Yes, contrary to your ordinance findings, Riverbend landfill was constructed in the floodway. And it's making its own adjustments. That's the subject of this letter. I want to make it clear to all where to go when you have to search for the guilty stage. There's several people at fault. It's built in a floodway, in a floodplain, next to a meandering 303D river in the area with liquefiable soils in wetlands, a wet climate was 1 million gallons of rainfall per acre per year, and a Earth's Cascadia subduction zone was 41 earthquakes of 41.
Commissioner.
Okay.
Anyway, I think we're going to be entering the punishment of the innocent stage, and you can lead horses to water. And I just hope that you look at this information. We've created an environmental disaster. I hope that you look at the engineering issues to protect our watershed and the citizens of the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Next, I have Ramsey McPhillips. If you'd please come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Ramsey McPhillips, 13,000 Southwest McPhillips Road here in McMinnville, Oregon. Thanks for letting me speak. A couple issues I just wanted to bring up. I'm sure you're aware that DEQ has authorized a official nuisance study for the landfill. It's a year-long study. They've been coming out periodically, different times, to register observations. Those observations have come back in a preliminary report showing that there is a serious problem at the landfill today, having nothing to do with expansion, but just today. Many families are living day-to-day with this at certain times to avoid the nuisance smell, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. So I just hope that you are aware that DEQ is taking this very seriously, and I hope you do as well. Second, there seems to be so many problems with the landfill, and there is a committee in this county called Solid Waste Advisory Committee. It has completely been castrated by your commission. It does nothing. It has been, the people who have been appointed to it are very frustrated. They just had a meeting having to do with some budgetary issues and were told by Ken that that wasn't their business. If you look back in the history of SWAC, it certainly was their business, but for some reason, because of this horrible conflict in the county with the landfill, SWAC has been marginalized. I think that the solid waste management plan, which is the sort of constitution for solid waste in this county, should be updated at this time because obviously there's a lot of changes going on. The county just lost a massive revenue stream. Stan, you called on the eve of the vote and said, if you're thinking of doing this, that study's been going on for 2 years. Someone from Yamhill County should have been involved with those deliberations at Metro if you were concerned that you wanted to continue that revenue stream. Calling embarrassingly the night before and saying if, it was humiliating to think that Yamhill County is taking that so lightly. I'm glad that they have taken their garbage away. I'm not saying that you should, but if you want to make this conflict go away, I really hope that you get more involved and do it through a committee which has been set up by the state and this county to function. Fire them all, get people who care. I hope you care more too, because right now I don't feel you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramsey. Marilyn Walter. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Mary, can you tap?
My name's Marilyn Walster, and my address is 14286 Northwest Old Morse Valley Road. My comments are in regard to the phone call from Commissioner Prumazich to Catherine.
Yes, it's working.
Some of them are. Thank you. Todd, can you tap your mic? No.
Hold your ears. That's
Stan.
working?
Okay.
It's okay, I got a loud voice.
Ken won't talk.
Sorry.
Anyway, my comments are in regard to the phone call made by Commissioner Prumazich to Councilor Catherine Harrington. I've read the entire transcript, and there are a few things that are, I think, incredibly bothersome, to put it mildly. So I'm going to read, the desire to move Metro trash from our waste management River Bend landfill has reared its ugly head again. Emphasis mine, our landfill, our River Bend landfill. And we would really appreciate you supporting Yamhill County and not stopping the flow of Metro trash to our landfill. The word "our" is a pronoun that connotes ownership and belonging. The use of this simple word "our" is unsettling. Mr. Primazic's unabashed possessiveness of Riverbend landfill is indicative of a conflict of interest in regards to dump expansion. Mr. Primazic used his official position as county commissioner to attempt to influence a decision by Metro councilors. He intimated that he was speaking for Yamhill County as a whole. The most important question I have is, who asked Mr. Primazic to make this phone call to Metro Councilor Catherine Harrington? I think that's an answer we all need to know. Whose bidding is he doing? Thank you.
Thank you. Sid Friedman? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Sid Friedman, 14286 Northwest Old Moores Valley Road in Yamhill. I'm not here to speak to the merits of Riverland landfill or any pending application that's before the county. I want to address Commissioner Primazic's recent communication to Metro, in which you purported to represent that Yamhill County supports the continued flow of Metro garbage to the dump. To the best of my knowledge, the county has never adopted a policy of actively encouraging the importation of Portland's garbage. Certainly, this Board of Commissioners never has. If I'm mistaken in this, please provide me with an official written copy of the minutes from the Board of Commissioners meeting where this policy was formally discussed and adopted. Regardless, it is totally wrong for any commissioner to send this kind of a communication to another governing body without first conferring with his fellow commissioners. One cannot help but wonder if the phone call was made at the behest of Waste Management. If so, that suggests a level of bias that would seem to mandate recusal from future proceedings concerning the dump. This is especially so in light of Commissioner Primazic's reference to Waste Management's landfill as our landfill, and his reference to opposition to garbage importation as rearing its ugly head. These are your constituents, and they care passionately about their community. They deserve respect, not denigration, regardless of whether you agree with them or not. So I believe the county is owed an apology, or at least an explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. That's all of the intent to speak cards I have. So we will move on to the agenda as it's printed. Item B on the agenda is our consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I will move that we approve our consent agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. On item 3 of the consent agenda, there is some clarification that the county administrator has brought forward. So, Laura?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, this item is the approval of the amendment to an agreement with Higher Ground Counseling for juvenile sex offender treatment. And there was a question regarding the provider, who is Mr. Devin Vaughn. And the agreement is with Higher Ground Counseling now. And there was a question about who will be providing the services and their qualifications. And the Director of Community Justice says that this company is actually Devin Vaughn's company, and Devin will continue to provide this service. His partner is Keith Ovalman, and while Keith will not be working with the youth in our county, his reputation is extremely good, and John Lynch, who is the supervisor in juvenile probation, has worked with him personally, and he is one of the best juvenile sex offender treatment providers in the state. So the good news about Keith's involvement is that while he will not work with our youth directly, we will get his expertise as a part of the team. with the Higher Ground Counseling team. And there are other two professionals that belong to this agency, and they also are very experienced and have a good reputation across the state. So we're being able to access their expertise, but Devin will remain the main contact and treatment provider for our youth.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and I appreciate that clarification.
And I don't
Okay.
know if Commissioner Olson has anything to add
No,
about
but
that.
what I will do is I will, on my recommendation for approval, of the consent agenda, I will add that we approve the consent agenda based on what's on the agenda and the additional information provided by the county administrator.
Very good. It's been moved that we accept the consent agenda as printed with the modifications or the additional information of the county administrator. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Moving to on item 7, the resolution. Do we want to read the resolution? It was part of the consent agenda. What would be the
Commissioner,
norm?
I believe you read the
I
resolution
read
in
it
full at our informal.
At
on
the
Tuesday.
informal, yes.
So it's at your discretion if you'd like to go ahead and read that resolution again
Well,
this morning, or?
The reason I bring it up, I think it's important,
Mhm.
and I think I would like to bring it to the public.
Sure.
So, thank you. In the matter of a resolution honoring Radioman Second Class Gary Bradbury Hodgson, USN, and the 73 other lost souls of the USS destroyer Frankie Evans, who gave of their lives in service of their country. Whereas on June 3rd, 1969, the destroyer USS Frankie Evans, while on a Southeast Asia Treaty Organization maneuver, was struck by the aircraft carrier HMAS Melbourne. And whereas the destroyer USS Frankie Evans was cut in half and the forward section of the ship sinking in 1,100 fathoms of water within 2 minutes, and whereas 74 lives were lost, including Oregon sailor, Radioman Second Class Gary Bradbury Hodgson, and whereas none of the 74 men lost during the Vietnam War are recognized on the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., and whereas the Frankie Evans Association for many years has been and still is lobbying in Washington, D.C. to have these 74 men added to the Vietnam Wall, and whereas in the interim, the Frankie Evans Association has taken it upon itself to place a memorial in each state where a sailor was lost, and whereas American Legion Post 21 of McMinnville has been selected by the Frankie Evans Association to place a monument in its Rose Garden to remember the 74 sailors lost at sea on June 3rd, 1969. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners does hereby recognize the placement of a memorial in honor of Radioman Second Class Gary Bradbury Hodgson and the American Legion Post in the American Legion Post 21 Rose Garden on July 8th, 2017. Done this first day of June 2017, Yamhill County Board of Commissioners. And that was approved as part of the consent agenda. Okay.
Did you actually vote?
We have no, I'm sorry.
Did you actually vote on to approve the consent agenda, or were you?
We
was that during the
voted
discussion?
to.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Keep me on my toes. Thank you, Chris. We do have another item that County Council is going to bring before us, but in respect for all the people that are here for the public hearing, I'm going to hold that over until after the public hearing, if that's okay with my fellow commissioners. Okay. So we will now move to item E of our docket, which is docket number SDR 2021-01-17, an appeal of a planning director approval for a marijuana processing facility. Applicant Richard E. Wagner. Appellants Harara Mahish et al. And I'm going to now reopen the hearing for the purpose of hearing staff report. And so, Mr. Friday?
Yes, sir. Excuse me. The first item we have for the board to consider is an objection from the opposing counsel about two of the May 18th letters from the Wagners that were submitted into the file. The opposing counsel objected because they contain new evidence. The options would be to either reopen the record to allow for additional rebuttal or have these letters rejected. We passed those concerns on to the applicant's attorney, and they've decided not to object to these letters being stricken from the record. What we would need the board to do is to pass a motion to formally reject the May 18th letters from Mary Wagner and her son Richard Wagner. And it can be something as simple as I move to reject the May 18th letters from Mary Wagner and Richard Wagner.
Okay.
I would move approval of that recommendation by staff to strike those letters of May 18th from the Wagners from the record.
Okay, I have a motion to reject the letters of May 18th that were submitted by the Wagners. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Ken.
As far as the staff recommendation, we've reviewed the extensive amount of testimony and information submitted by the parties. Many of the letters in opposition objected to the grow operation, but I want to remind the commissioners that's not part of this request. The outdoor grow operation is allowed by House Bill 3400, which was passed by the legislature in 2015. Some of the opposing testimony stated the county did not have any marijuana regulations, and that's somewhat true and somewhat not true. It's not entirely accurate because we do have regulations. They just happen to be the same regulations that we apply to other farming processing facilities. In this case, the request is for a marijuana processing facility located on a farm operation that provides at least 1/4 of the farm crops processed at the site. This request is evaluated under the site design review standards. And the site design review does not evaluate the use, but rather the design of the facility and whether the design is appropriate. We've looked at the testimony, evidence, and regulations and have crafted conditions to try to address the concerns voiced by the neighbors during the hearing process. We're recommending approval of the request with additional conditions, which Lance will go over here in a moment, and I will provide copies of those conditions to the audience when they want to. Go ahead, Lance.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Lance Woods, and as you are aware, we've had a significant amount of testimony submitted regarding this application. We have reviewed it, and as Mr. Friday stated, we are recommending approval of the application with additional conditions of approval. Conditions 1 through 6 of the handout and Condition 15 were established prior to the appeal, while Conditions 7 through Condition 14 were drafted following a review of the testimony submitted. I will now read the conditions recommended by staff. Condition 1, the facility is approved within the approximately 5,000 square foot area of the building shown on the attached site map. Condition number 2, prior to operation of the facility, all required building, septic, and electrical permits shall be obtained. Condition number 3, prior to issuance of permits, the water supply and access shall be required to meet the Sheridan Rural Fire Department standards and conditions of approval. I'd like to note here that this condition will apply directly to the conditions imposed by the Sheridan Fire District, which are as follows, and I quote, "Owner must supply a minimum of 32,000 gallons of water for fire suppression connected to an approved dry hydrant with fire department connections. If at any time the method of processing changes from cold water and ice, the owner must submit plans for review and approval by the building department and fire department. Plans for location of water tank and access to be provided to the fire district for review and approval." End quote. Condition 4, the applicant shall obtain all permits required by the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, OLCC, and the Oregon Department of Agriculture, ODA. Condition number 5, the existing parking on the property shall be maintained. Condition 6, the farm operation shall provide at least 1/4 of the farm crops processed at the facility. Condition 7, the applicant shall process no more than 1,000 pounds of marijuana per year. Processing greater than 1,000 pounds per year will require approval of a new site design review. I'd like to note here that this condition is recommended following testimony from the applicant that this is the upper limit under consideration, and an increase in processing would therefore necessitate approval through submission and review of a site design review application. Condition 8, annually, beginning 1 year from the approval date for the processing facility, the applicant shall submit a written statement prepared by a certified public accountant that certifies compliance of the processing facility with Condition 6 and Condition 7 of the site design review approval for the marijuana processing facility. I'd like to note that this condition follows similar language that may be imposed on wineries and farm stands to ensure that incidental items and fees from promotional activities do not make up more than 25% of the total annual sales. This condition is to ensure at least 1/4 of the crop processed at the facility is grown on site, and the applicant is not exceeding the 1,000 pound limit for marijuana processed at the facility. Condition number 9, any lighting used to illuminate the processing facility shall be placed, shielded, or deflected so as not to shine onto adjacent dwellings. Condition 10, prior to use of the processing facility, the applicant shall submit a report by a mechanical engineer licensed in the state of Oregon, demonstrating that the facility will be equipped with an effective odor control system. The odor control system will be sized for the cubic feet per minute, equivalent to the square footage of the building space, i.e. 1 CFM, cubic foot per minute, per square foot of the building floor space. At a minimum, any fans or filters used in the system shall be rated for the applicable CFM. The filtration system shall be maintained in working order and shall be in use. This condition is recommended following testimony submitted expressing concerns about odors emanating from the processing facility. Condition 11, marijuana waste shall be stored in a secured waste receptacle in the possession of and under the control of the OLCC licensee, and there shall be no burning of marijuana waste products on the premises. Note that this condition is recommended following a review of conditions commonly imposed upon processing facilities in other counties and state, and staff believes this condition ensures marijuana waste generated on site will be responsibly disposed of. Condition 12, the methodology of marijuana processing shall be as described in the application for marijuana concentrate processing, which is a mechanical extraction process that uses non-hydrocarbon-based solvents such as water, vegetable glycerin, vegetable oils, or animal fats, provided that the process does not involve high heat or pressure. Any proposed alteration or modification to the approved processing methodology will require approval of a new site design review. Note that this is the methodology the applicant has proposed in the site design review application. This is also the endorsement the applicant is applying for with the OLCC. And as mentioned above, any changes to the methodology employed on site will require a new site design review. Condition 13, prior to use of the processing facility, the applicant shall provide to the planning director a copy of a water right permit, certificate, or other water use authorization from the Oregon Water Resource Department, or a statement that water is supplied from a public or private water provider, along with name, contact information, and a copy of the service contract of the water provider, or proof from the Oregon Water Resource Department that the water to be used is from a source that does not require a water right. Condition 14, the applicant shall provide the planning director with a copy of the OLCC required written plan for making each marijuana product produced at the processing facility as prescribed in OAR 845-025-3230. Note that this condition is recommended following a review of the requirements imposed by the OLCC for licensed marijuana processors. Since this plan is required to be submitted to OLCC for making each cannabinoid product produced at the facility, we are requiring it for our records. Also, please note that the planning department will be requiring this information for all subsequent marijuana processing site design review applications. And finally, condition 15, Modification of any of the above conditions requires approval under Section 1101.02 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Violation of any of the above conditions may result in revocation of the site design review permit with the process detailed in Sections 1101.06 and 1101.07 of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance.
Are there any questions?
I just have a couple, Ken or Lance, on some of the new intentions regarding what the county will be provided from the applicant, with certificates and everything. My only concern there is that we're putting the conditions in place.
Commissioner, could you speak up?
Oh, that we're putting those new conditions in place. How is the county going to ensure that those conditions are adhered to without the county or somebody physically checking them? And if they're not adhered to, what can we do if they're not adhered to?
I just want to make sure I understand what condition you're talking about. Like number 14, about requiring the OLCC plan to be provided to our office?
Yes, that's when it will be stored and secure. If they don't, and they don't report, what's our options?
The option is to revoke the site design review pursuant to section 1101.06 and 07. And what we do is send them out a letter saying that we've received a complaint. We do a site visit. We confirm whether or not the complaint is valid. And if it can't be resolved, then it could end up back here before the Board of Commissioners to revoke their site design review approval.
So,
Thanks for that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So then basically, every one of these is complaint-driven?
Yes.
So there's nothing we do regarding,
We don't do anything like the OLCC where we schedule an appointment and go and inspect the facility, other than building permits and septic permits, things like that. But once the facility is up and running, unless we receive a complaint, we don't do a site visit to that property.
And that's standard operating procedure.
oh, one more question. How many of these, in the staff recommendation conditions, how many of them were proposed by the applicant?
I don't believe any of these were proposed by the applicant.
Or included in their,
Well, for instance, condition number 14, they're required to send information on the way that they process their product to the OLCC. We think that'd be a good information to have in our file, so we're requesting that. As far as the condition about water, there was some concern about the water use. And it gives him a range of options on what to do as far as water use. We just want to know what that plan is going to be, because we know what his plan is right now, but if it changes, we'd like to know whether or not, he's going to be trucking in water. Because he might have to do that to begin the operation. So we want to get confirmation from the Water Resources Department that he's either using the well water and it's allowed under the Water Resources Department, or he's got some other plan. We just want to make sure the Water Resources Department is in the loop on this, and that we also get that information.
and that 1,000 pounds, was that their recommendation or yours?
They testified that at most it would be no more than 1,000 pounds of marijuana that would be processed at this facility. And so we took that testimony out, and put it in as a condition, because that's what the applicant was requesting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does that take care of the questions? Okay. So with having heard the staff recommendation, I will now close the hearing, and we will go into deliberation and make our decision. Do you want to have a discussion prior to, or does somebody want to make a motion?
I guess it doesn't make any difference as long as we have the discussion, so.
Yes.
I would, I just want to say, I guess, consider this deliberation prior to any vote or a motion. I think that these staff recommendations are very comprehensive, and I think that they have pretty much touched on all of the concerns that the appellants had expressed. So I feel they're rather stringent.
The only one that really concerns me over and above the overall aspect of this is the road going up there. I did a site visit, and the road to that facility is, to say the least, difficult to traverse when it's dry. I cannot imagine an emergency vehicle having to go up that road in a rainy or a rainstorm, because it is steep, it's windy, and does not really, and I don't propose to be a road engineer, but it certainly does not have a road base that even in dry weather, as I drove up there, it was certainly not a road that I would want to traverse in a storm. So I have some concerns about the safety of not only people who would be going to that facility for the purpose of purchase, but in the event there were an emergency up there, I can't imagine a fire truck or an ambulance trying to get up that road in bad weather. So that was one of my major concerns as I did that site visit. So,
If I'm not mistaken, were they not, when they discussed this initially, talk about the relative infrequency of trips up that road?
Yes, we don't have a traffic study, but yes, they did lay out why they thought it was not going to be that many trips up and down the road. And part of it is the 1,000 pounds of marijuana that you would not expect that to take a lot of trips. So.
mm-hmm. Yes. And
Go ahead, Stan.
yeah, and not being familiar with the processing, I don't know what the possibility of some type of an accident on the facility that would warrant an emergency call out. But it was something that concerns me. The operation concerns me. So, but that's my personal opinion.
A couple comments I have. First of all, for those in the audience that know me, when I was serving as the mayor of McMinnville, I had a vote to break a tie on whether we were going to allow the sale, the processing, and manufacturing and growing of marijuana within the city of McMinnville. One of the reasons I voted yes on that is because I believe that marijuana processing should be done only in an area designed, such as an industrial or light industrial area, that had the infrastructure to support that kind of a process. I don't believe an agricultural area at all we can't imagine what will go on, and I don't believe we can support that kind of a process in a rural area. There's a lot of passion on both sides. It's hard sometimes when you have to separate that passion from the facts when you're trying to make a judgment, especially a land use judgment. But as I did that, I looked at a lot of the significant research. Last weekend, I had a chance to talk to people at the Western Interstate Region of the National Association of Counties and Sun River, that they were there from Bend and from Colorado, and had some of the same issues. When it comes right down to it, I have several reasons that I do not believe that the applicant has adequately demonstrated that a rural area such as his property can support the either current or future processing to the requirement of things such as water storage. Sheridan Fire District talks about 22,000 gallons for firefighting. Well, there's also the processing, and as state water regulations, you can't use a domestic well for water for any processing of marijuana type products. I'm very concerned that whether the rain falling annually can provide him without trucking, and when we talk about trucking water in, now all of a sudden we're not talking about just small vehicles going to pick up product and bringing in supplies and taking product out. Water tankers are not small vehicles. That's a concern of mine. I'm also concerned about the disposal of the spent or used water used in the process. And even though it may be stored in a tank during a seismic event, such as the Cascadia, what's going to happen to that water? Where's it going to go? And I'm just generally concerned about the siting and location of the facility, knowing that the impact on additional traffic it'll have on Dusty's right, as Commissioner Primisich said. And to tell you the truth, I cannot support, in all honesty, even though I voted to approve it in the city of McMinnville, I cannot support due to the risk associated with the siting of the processing facility in a fairly topographically restrained rural area. I'd have to vote myself to uphold the appeal and not uphold the applicant, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner.
One of the things I always like to try to do is, we can interject our personal opinions about marijuana or about wine, and I don't think that's what we're called to do. I think that is that train has left the station, so to speak. But what I would like to say is that in all of these matters, that we should be, pretty much cognizant of the fact that if we were to intersperse the word wine or winery with some of these requests, we would, I believe, be disingenuous if we didn't recognize that these are allowable and that we are doing that today with another legal product. Whatever you think about alcohol, whatever you think about marijuana, this is something that is allowable, and this is what we do with wineries, and these conditions are not unlike what we do with wineries. So that's my only basis for saying that the appeal, I believe, should be denied, because it really is kind of like, how do we pick and choose what products or what farm crops we're going to thumbs up or thumbs down? And if we do it with wineries, how do we not do it with? So, Ken, I'm just wondering if I'm kind of tracking with your staff recommendations.
Yeah, that's, we're trying to treat this as any other farm crop. And there's some uniqueness as far as the smell of it, but, we're trying to address the concerns as we see that we would with any other farm crop. So, yeah, I think you're tracking it.
Well, I attended the same conference that Commissioner Olson did over the last week, and that was one of the workshops, was on what they're doing in a variety of counties that are currently dealing with this issue. And the points that Commissioner Olson was raising are very, very legitimate, and concerns about water, and how it affects not only the operation there, but where that water goes beyond that facility once the water has been used in the processing. I do know that there is a cause and effect, and I know that many jurisdictions are time, place, and manner becoming a very big issue on how they work with these kinds of applications, and I have very serious questions, a number of them, but the one that stuck out, and the reason I brought it up initially was that road. And I do know that the entire process is one that, to Commissioner Olson's statement, would be better served in an industrial area. I just don't think that it belongs where it is. So I'm not in favor of moving forward at this time. I do not have a motion. I would entertain one.
I'll make a motion that we uphold the appeal and deny the original applicant. Is that stated that way? Is that okay?
It has been moved that we uphold the appeal and deny the applicant on this, in this process. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So we will then move forward with the record.
Mr.
County
Chair,
Counsel?
Commissioners, I would ask that you give me until June 22nd, Thursday, to provide the board order and findings in support of your decision.
Thank you.
I'm asking to deliver the final findings, the board order with the decision in it, the final written findings on June 22nd for final approval by the board.
Thank you, Counsel. Okay, with that, then we did have an add-on item to the agenda, and at this time, I would ask County Counsel to bring that forward.
Sure. Wait a few moments for
Maybe
folks to
take a
leave.
2-minute break or pause.
We'll take a little break here, allow the audience to disperse.
Share.
And as far as how we would have to authorize this issue again, because I think they are to talk to some of them.
Thank you, Ken. Lance?
Thank you.
Just to address this issue.
Specific provisions in there, ordinance and those like
Exhibit A, B, C is attached. Did they get them?
Okay, so if you could, Christian, would you
Sure.
like to bring forward what we're discussing here?
Yeah, so you should all have a copy of the purchase and sale agreement. It's loose. Where were they? Oh, they were at the back. Thank you. Yeah, these are my extra copies. Yeah, so as you know, we've got a number of surplus parcels of real property that the county has acquired over the years through the property tax foreclosure process. We've been discussing the sale of one of these parcels. It's a 5.5 acre parcel along the Willamette River, a sale to Mac Water and Light. We've been negotiating the purchase and sale agreement. The copy you have before you has a couple of the most recent revisions that I wanted to discuss with you before asking you to consider whether or not you're ready to approve this agreement and move forward with entering into the purchase and sale agreement. Under section 7.1, at the top of page 3, there was a condition that we might allow for some credit against the purchase price if the buyer completes an environmental phase 1 prior to closing. Under 7.2, there was a similar allowance made for a potential credit against the purchase price for trash removal. The aggregate maximum amount allowed for either of those two credits would be $5,000. So we had talked about asking them to place that cap in there, and that cap won't be a soft cap. They would only be entitled to a cap equal to what they actually spent on either of those two cleanups. So that was one condition that we discussed. Section 7.7 on the next page 4 clarifies that if this agreement is approved, it would still come back before the board one final time immediately prior to closing. for your consideration. Under 7.10, we had also talked about asking them to include some language that would allow or require them, in the event they decided to sell all or a portion of this property in the future, that they would be required to offer that property first to the county at the same price at which we are selling it to them. They've agreed to that with some qualifications. They would like that offer price in the future to include any improvements that they might have made to the property. And they would like to limit that repurchase requirement and right of first refusal to expire 2 years after closing. So they were not comfortable with an open-ended requirement to sell the property back to the county, either at the price we're selling it to them, which is $165,000, or that number plus the value of any improvements that they would have added in the interim. So that was the one. That's what they've offered here, is that they would like that requirement to last no longer than 2 years. And then finally, in section 16, we talked about the fact that they consider this parcel very unique because it is one they hope to use for a future water project, and that they wanted us to add what's known as the right of specific performance to the agreement. That language is in section 16 now, that if for whatever reason we defaulted, essentially we changed our mind and decided not to move forward with the sale, they could cause us, by going to court and getting a court order, to perform under the agreement and convey the property to them. I added the language in the first sentence that clarified that to say, if we are in default, and provided that they are not in default under their obligations, and they have met those obligations and satisfied all of the other conditions that they're required to meet under the agreement, then we would agree that they could cause us to move forward with the transaction and sell them the property. So those are the most recent changes. So if you wanted to discuss those, or if you have any questions for me about where we are with this transaction.
Well, I have one under item 7.10. The 2 year, I think, is too short a period of time. As we talked earlier, if they were to choose to just carve off a piece of that for a pump station, which is the primary purpose of buying this property, it would take them 2 years to go through all the permitting process. So I don't think we need to have an open-ended, but I would like to make that 5 year, and I would entertain that as an alternative to their 2 year proposal.
I would add, Mr. Chair, that we've had this property for sale for quite a long period of time.
Well, we've had it on the books. We haven't actually.
We haven't tried
Well-
to sell it.
We haven't tried to sell it. We've had it for
Well,
sale for.
what I mean is that if anyone were interested in it, and they have expressed an interest, as they have for a number of years, anyone who's interested in looking at the properties that we have, do approach us if there's interest there. No, we haven't advertised it for sale, but I think at this point, we have a willing buyer, and I don't think it's unreasonable for them to say, all right, let's just limit this instead of open-ended to 2 years. I think at some point we can, pretty much split hairs, and I think that they're certainly within their rights to not ask that it not be open-ended. So I would move approval of this purchase agreement based on the changes that you've made.
Limiting the repurchase to 2 years.
Correct.
Okay.
I certainly have nothing wrong with 2 years, especially for this particular piece of property, because this particular piece of property, being unique, is being purchased for one reason and one reason only. So I do not look at the city of McMinnville, through its Water and Light Commission, to ever really look at selling this piece of property, so I'm satisfied with the 2 years.
So do I have a motion?
Are
I
there
think she
any,
already made a motion.
So if, I drafted up a motion.
Okay.
If you'd like to read it, this should cover all of the bases we need to cover if you're prepared
Thank
to
you.
Thank you, Christian.
authorize the sale.
Thank you, Christian.
Yep.
I would make a motion to declare tax lot R4327009000 a 5.5 acre parcel of undeveloped real property acquired by the county through property tax foreclosure as surplus property and authorize the execution of a purchase and sale agreement to sell said property to the City of McMinnville, a municipal corporation of the state of Oregon acting by and through its Water and Light Commission for $165,000 pursuant to the terms and conditions of said purchase and sale agreement and the pending final approval of this board prior to closing.
And the agreement that we would be executing would be the agreement that you have before you today.
Correct. We have a motion to complete this sale based on the sales agreement that has been provided by council. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Do I have any commissioners' updates, anything else that they'd like to bring forward? Then with that, we will close this meeting of the the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners from June 1st, 2017. Thank you.
Were you going to say